will be missed, and thank you for that service. We now come to number 1, Jessica Morden.
Number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I recognise the substantial public and parliamentary interest in this matter. Consequently, I visited very recently the National Archives in Kew to review the RFA Sir Galahad files. As a result, we are looking to release a further 2 files subject to mod legal confirming that individuals' rights under the Data Protection Act would not be contravened. In relation to the 5 files of witness statements, I want maximum transparency subject to the Public Records Act and ensuring personal data is protected, and I'll provide a further update shortly.
Jessica Morden.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. On Saturday, I attended the first Remembrance and Reunion event for the survivors and the family of those who were lost on the attack at Sir Galahad, to whom, and I know the Minister knows this, and I thank him for his earlier response, it is deeply important that the remaining documents from the Board of Inquiry are released so that we can get to the truth of what happened on the 8th of June 1982. So for those who have lived with this for 42 years, can the Minister, he's told us what he might release, can he tell us when we will have those decisions?
What I can say to the Honourable Lady, and I do pay tribute to the tenacity with which she has pursued this, and I've enjoyed our meeting to discuss the matter and meetings with the Welsh Guards. It is important that this is handled quickly, and we are moving at pace to ensure that we can do so with, of course, the caveats that I have just described.
Sir Iain Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I knew a number of the people that served in the Welsh Guards at the time, having been in the Scots Guards myself, and a number who didn't come back. And can I say congratulations to the Honourable Lady for her question, but the key point here is my right honourable friend says they're moving at pace, but this is decades after this has happened, and there is no question now that there was some kind of a cover-up that took place. So when he comes to look at those documents again, can he please make sure that on the balance of judgment that we err in favour of opening up so that those who have died and have had their reputations trashed can actually stand up once again and say proudly it wasn't them?
Minister.
Well, the Board of Inquiry is quite clear about the attribution of blame, and the Welsh Guards were absolutely exonerated, and that's the government's position. My position is always for one of transparency, and certainly when I've been looking at these documents, that's been at the forefront of my mind.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I too was at the event that my honourable friend from Newport East attended at the weekend, and there on behalf of my constituent Colin Silver, who was there, and many of the others who, of course, didn't come back from the brave Welsh Guards. I've also visited Fitzroy and seen the location myself, and I was also able to assure people of the united support for the people of the Falkland Islands in this House for their defence and for their security. But could I press him on this point about the timing? Are we talking here in terms of weeks, are we talking months, or are we talking years? Because time is moving on and we need these quickly.
Well, look, I'm not going to be drawn on precise times, but not years.
Natalie Elphicke.
Mr. Speaker, my constituent Oliver Richardson, now the Mayor of Deal, was just 21 when he survived the sinking of the Galahad. 40 years on, he says to me that there is no reason for this supposed secrecy, that many people were neither offered nor wanted confidentiality in relation to just saying what they had seen. Our armed services, they serve us all, and we must honour that service by giving them and the families of those lost and injured on the Galahad the answers they need. I would urge the Minister to release all of the Falklands Galahad papers at pace.
Well, the government will do everything it can in the interest of transparency, but we, like everybody else, are bound by the Data Protection Act. I'm sure she appreciates that.
Henry Smith.
Question 2, sir.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, the UK is committed to free and open Indo-Pacific, and we're putting our regional approach on a long-term strategic footing. And I have just returned this weekend from Australia, where we've been talking to our colleagues there, working hard on the Indo-Pacific programme.
Henry Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Stability in the Indo-Pacific has been largely aided by the military base presence on Diego Garcia. What assessment has my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, made of the military base and the island of Diego Garcia remaining under full British sovereignty so that we can help counter the many threats of the modern world, whether that be China, Iran or others?
Secretary of State.
Well, as I think my honourable friend knows, I absolutely share the goal of making sure that that base, Diego Garcia, remains permanently available for our use and indeed for the United States. It's strategically positioned, it's absolutely vital, and I think there is read across to other military facilities we have elsewhere. It remains safe in our hands.
Tim Farron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When assessing our ability to influence the stability of that region or any other, has the Secretary of State conducted any kind of impact assessment on the impact of our reduction from 0.7% of GDP invested in international aid, or indeed the fact that we have the smallest standing army, the United Kingdom, for 200 years?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman will recognise, right honourable gentleman, recognise that I look after the defence rather than the overseas development budget, but I can tell him, and I think he'll welcome this, that now, because of the Indo-Pacific tilt, we have ships permanently with a presence there, HMS Spey and Tamar, and also a littoral response group south, which operates in the Indo-Pacific. We've already sent the carrier strike group previously. It's going again next year to the region, and that's in addition to the GCAP, Sixth Generation Programme, and of course AUKUS, for which I was in Australia this weekend. I think we can all agree we're doing a lot more than ever before in the Indo-Pacific.
Secretary of State, Shadow Secretary of State John Healey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you have, I want to pay tribute to the Armed Forces Minister at his last Defence oral questions. Mr. Speaker, since the last election, we've had 5 Chancellors, 4 Foreign Secretaries, 3 Prime Ministers, 2 Defence Secretaries, but only 1 Armed Forces Minister. He has been a rare constant in the turmoil of government, totally committed to defence. We thank him for that and we wish him well. Mr. Speaker, on the Indo-Pacific, we welcome last week's updated defence agreement with Australia and further progress on AUKUS and today's 10-year plan for Barrow to support AUKUS. This is our most important strategic alliance beyond NATO. So why does the Defence Secretary, given leadership of key parts of AUKUS, to the most junior minister in his department?
Well, as I just explained, I've just been in Australia talking about AUKUS. I've previously been to Japan, I think at least twice, possibly 3 times on AUKUS, to Italy, sorry, not to Italy, obviously, on AUKUS. It's on GCAP, but with an Indo-Pacific tilt. But I'm interested to hear, I do absolutely agree with the right honourable gentleman, his comments about my honourable friend, but I am interested to hear his comments on the Indo-Pacific, because back in 2021, when the integrated review suggested a tilt to the Indo-Pacific, he called it a serious flaw in the programme and urged us not to defocus from elsewhere in the world.
Liz Twist.
Question 3, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with other government departments, the Ministry of Defence delivers a range of services to our brilliant veterans and their families. This includes the administration and payment of armed forces pensions and compensation, the provision of tailored advice and assistance through the Veterans Welfare Service, Defence Transition Services and the integrated personal commissioning for veterans.
Scrutined. Minister, it's scrutined, I think.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'm answering questions 3, 4, 9 and 16 together.
Excellent, thank you. Liz Twist.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A new report by Northumbria University found that suicide among serving personnel and veterans could be reduced if there was better understanding within existing care provision of the specific challenges they face. The report also found that military families felt unheard, misunderstood and not cared for during the most difficult periods of their lives. So what steps is the Minister taking alongside our NHS to deliver compassionate, trauma-informed support for serving personnel and veterans?
Minister.
Well, I'm very glad she has raised that with me. She will know that we have a defence suicide prevention strategy which is reviewed regularly. She'll also know that overall suicide in the armed forces is below what we might expect in the civilian population. There's a subgroup within that, that's young men, where it does look as if the rate is going up. We're looking very close at that to better understand the reasons for it and how we can prevent it.
Kate Lund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to raise an issue on behalf of my constituent who joined the Army in 1987 and served in Queen's Lancashire Regiment until 1994. During a wrongful operation, he severed all the nerves in his feet. He's now 52 years old and suffers from several conditions which leaves him in excruciating pain every day. He was previously on disability living allowance and then moved to PIP. But 18 months ago he was told he was no longer eligible. Is that really the way to treat our veterans?
Minister.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear about the Honourable Lady's constituent, and if she'd like to write to me with some details, I'd be more than happy to take it up. As I said in my opening remarks, we work with other government departments, and it does sound as if this is something that's not principally the responsibility for the MOD, but I'd be more than happy to hear from her about her constituent.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. About a year ago, the Honourable Member for Wrexham undertook a very important and groundbreaking piece of work on behalf of female veterans and women in the armed forces. Following that, I had the honour of helping her set up the APVG on Women in Defence. That's given a platform to female veterans, female service personnel, as well as those working in defence and in the charitable sector to talk to members across the House and at every level. And we're very much looking forward to the female veteran strategy. Can I ask my right honourable friend for an assurance that this government remains committed to not just equal treatment for women in the armed forces, but also an equally positive experience for every woman who chooses to serve?
Minister.
Yeah, I absolutely can give my honourable friend that assurance. I pay tribute to him and our honourable friend, the member for Wrexham, for all the hard work that they have done to improve the position of women in our armed forces. They are absolutely central to where the way defence will be going in the years ahead, as encapsulated in our target to have 30% of our armed forces female by 2030, a challenging and ambitious target. I would mention the improvements we've made to uniform policies, mentoring, flexible service, wraparound childcare, and of course our zero tolerance to USB as examples of things that we have done very recently to improve the lived experience of women in our armed forces.
Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the last census, there were just over 17,000 veterans living in Birmingham, and of those, 35% of them were over the age of 80. Despite pledging to end veterans' homelessness, last year government figures show that it actually rose by 14%, with up to 180 veterans' households across the UK being made newly homeless each month. So can the Minister tell me what he's doing to make sure our veterans in Birmingham and across the UK who made their enormous sacrifices for our safety and security do not end up homeless? Thank you.
It's plainly not right that anybody should be without a home, whether they're a veteran or not. What I would say to the Honourable Lady is that we are doing everything in our power to ensure that people, as they transition out of the armed forces, are set up well for civilian life, and the overwhelming majority of people who leave our armed forces are precisely in that position. So using things like the Defence Transition Service, for example, for those who might have particular problems when they return to civilians, as all members of the armed forces ultimately do, we're ensuring that we minimise the number of people who have served in our armed forces who are left without a home.
Mark Plitch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Minister aware of the excellent work of the Battle Back Centre in Lilleshall in my constituency, a successful collaboration between the Royal British Legion and Sport England? And would he consider visiting there quite soon, or perhaps his colleague, the Veterans Minister, given they've treated over 6,000 serving and ex-service personnel of all sorts of injuries? The staff there are fabulous, superb, and they deserve a visit.
Minister.
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for the invite, which I will most gladly take up. Battleback does a wonderful job. I pay tribute to what it does, and also to my honourable friend for the work he has done in supporting them.
Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Morley veteran Roy Segar recently passed away in his mid-90s, a familiar face to us all in Morley. Roy has done so much for veterans and for the Royal British Legion locally, and has been our parade marshal. Would my honourable friend join me in paying tribute to Roy and all our unsung hero veterans, and thank them for all they do, and send our thoughts and prayers to Roy's family?
Yes, I very much would do so. Our veterans are a wonderful part of our communities. They deserve all the support we can give them. And I'd also just like to pay tribute to the Royal British Legion that's always there for our veterans when they need it. And I speak as president of my local branch. The Legion is a very powerful institution. Mr. Speaker, I know you've had a lot to do with it. It's an important part of what we are and who we are. I pay tribute to it as well as to my honourable friend's late constituent.
Shadow Minister Steve McCabe.
Yeah. I appreciate the Minister's earlier answer, but is there a need for more urgent intervention when the Royal British Legion Industries say there are 6,000 veterans homeless or in danger of becoming so? Or is the Minister for the OVA right to hail getting 500 off the streets as a triumph?
Well, I think getting 500 off the street is something that is good, and it's to certainly be a start. But I would say to the honourable gentleman that one person without a home is one too many, whether they're a civilian or a veteran. The important thing is we look at factors which might be peculiar to defence that predisposes people to homelessness, because I think we have a particular duty to those people in accordance with the military covenant. In general, he knows, I know, that people leaving the armed forces are much better placed for the balance of their lives and civilian life than an equivalent person in civil society. But that isn't the case. Some people fall in the cracks, and we must make sure that they're scooped up and looked after.
Ian Blackford.
Question number 5, Mr. Speaker.
Minister Heape.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much indeed for your words at the beginning of the session, and so to the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Shadow Secretary of State. Both of you very kind indeed to say what you said. The UK Armed Forces are meeting all of their commitments, but there's no mistaking that they are very busy, as you would expect, in such a turbulent geopolitical time. People across the Army, Navy, Air Force and Strategic Command are working incredibly hard, and we're very grateful to them and their families for their forbearance whilst they do so. The government is investing £1.95 billion extra in our resilience and readiness. But more than investment is needed, Mr. Speaker, and that is why all 3 services are getting back into the business of being ready for warfighting. The 3rd United Kingdom Division recently exercised its combat service support echelons for the first time in decades. The Royal Navy is operating concurrent task groups as well as forward presence, a test for our naval logistics, and the Royal Air Force is refining its abilities to disperse the force for its agile combat employment mechanism.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and of course we commend the efforts of all in our armed services, but the Defence Committee Ready for War report sustains that our armed forces are constantly overstretched and are being deployed above their capacity. So when are the government going to respond appropriately to the scale of the geopolitical challenges, drive up recruitment and retention, and make sure that we face the challenges that we see ahead of us, we can take them full on, and we're ready for whatever comes our way?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's no escaping that the world is incredibly complicated at the moment. In the Euro-Atlantic, the challenge of Russia; in the Middle East, the challenge of Iran and its proxies; in the Indo-Pacific, the growing competition with China; and then across Africa and other parts of the world, there remains the challenge of violent extremism. But in a time of such crisis, one would expect the armed forces to be exactly as busy as they are. That doesn't mean we should take for granted the effort that they are putting in. But if we weren't reaching for them as extensively as we are right now, you'd have to question when on earth you would reach for them, given the demands on our nation right now.
Richard Drax.
Mr. Speaker, can I pay tribute to my honourable and gallant friend, the Armed Forces Minister? I'm very sad to hear he is going. He talks of war fighting. As he knows, I'm on the Defence Committee. I would challenge the fact that we are ready to fight a sustained war with the armed forces that we have, and bearing in mind all the threats that we've faced, that's become very real. Would he now, bearing in mind collective responsibility is about to go, stand at the dispatch box and say we need to spend a lot more money on defence?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's soon but not yet. Although Colleagues on both sides of the House will note that on every opportunity when I've been invited to respond to such a question, like all good defence ministers, I never miss the opportunity to say no. But the reality is that our armed forces remain fearsome. Yes, it is the job of this House and particularly the Honourable Gentleman's Committee to scrutinise, as they have, our readiness. And I commend the report to the House if colleagues haven't already read it. Our armed forces do need reinvestment in their ability to sustain themselves at a war-fighting level. That's no scandal. That is the consequence of a peace dividend that allowed successive governments to rightly disinvest in the resilience that kept our Cold War force credible. But as the Secretary of State so rightly said in his speech the other week, we're now in a pre-war era, and so it's the responsibility of this government and those that follow to reinvest in that necessary war-fighting capability.
John Speller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But the Minister rightly points about the ability to sustain fighting. He knows that an exercise conducted with the Americans showed that the British Army would run out of munitions within 10 days. The battles in Ukraine showed very early on this was going to be an artillery war. Why did it take, I've asked this question to several ministers, so I hope he's got the answer now. Why did it take from March or April of 22 to July 23 to actually place the orders for new munitions? We cannot afford this sort of delay within the Ministry of Defence.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the contract has now been placed and increases our supply of 155 significantly. I just take issue with the exercise the Honourable Gentleman cites. I'm not aware of the one that he's specifically referring to. In exercises that I have seen, where the UK have operated alongside the US, what happens again and again and again is that American senior commanders hold the UK force elements in the highest of regard.
Thank you, sir. As I used to do his job, can I also join the tributes to the outgoing, outstanding Armed Forces Minister? Yeah. The Ready for War report just referenced identified problems with recruitment as one reason that deters our ability to fight. The Defence Secretary himself called our recruitment system ludicrous, and he told the Times earlier this month, I quote, that the Amazon generation, which is used to getting things instantly, were not prepared to wait a year to join the army. He's absolutely right. So when will the utterly ludicrous Crapiter finally be sacked?
Mr. Speaker, I'm unable to answer the Honourable Gentleman's specific question, but he will be heartened to hear that as a consequence of all that is going on in the world and the geopolitical uncertainty that requires us to use our armed forces so extensively, in recent months we've enjoyed record expressions of interest in joining His Majesty's Armed Forces. Obviously, what we need to do is to make sure that from that moment of expressing interest to starting training is as short as possible, and all colleagues on the front bench to see the need to do that.
Sloane Saxby.
Question 6, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and with your permission I'd like to answer questions 6 and 20 together. The most recent estimate shows that the MOD supports around 209,000 jobs in industries across the UK, and I'm pleased to confirm this figure will be boosted further by confirmation last week that BAE Systems will partner in Australia to build their nuclear-powered submarines, supporting 7,000 additional British jobs across the programme's lifespan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my honourable friend agree that MOD procurement with small British companies in rural areas like North Devon can significantly increase defence-related jobs, enhance the local economy, especially when in high-wage R&D and manufacturing industries? Will he commit to ensuring that additional high-skilled jobs and economic benefits of future contracts be considered in procurement decisions?
Well, it's an excellent point from my honourable friend who is a champion of defence SMEs in her constituency. As to procurement rules supporting SMEs like those in North Devon, our new integrated procurement model will ensure that UK industrial capability and exportability considerations are included in procurement evaluation criteria, such as on new medium helicopter.
But to ensure we absolutely maximise opportunities for British industry, on Friday I also announced, Mr Speaker, that we will be undertaking a rapid review of how Cabinet Office social value rules impact upon the development of sovereign capability.
Mark Paulson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Minister will be aware of the successful export order for high-value naval electric propulsion technology that's manufactured by GE in my Rugby constituency that's going to Singapore, achieved through the assistance of both the MOD and the Department of Business and Trade. Will he agree that this shows how support for this world-leading British technology enables new business in a fast-developing part of the world while providing significant new high-value jobs for my constituents?
Well, again, my honourable friend asked an excellent question, and I do welcome the valuable contribution of GE in his constituency in supplying high-tech motors, including for Royal Navy ships such as the Type 26 frigates and Queen Elizabeth-class aircraft carriers. And it was precisely because the Ministry of Defence recognises the importance of GE's Rugby facility that we were pleased to have reached an agreement with the company in 2019 to ensure these motors continue to be manufactured there. Finally, he's right about export. That's why it's such a key part of our new integrated procurement model, because it boosts industrial resilience, prosperity and constituency like his, but also it strengthens international alliances, Mr Speaker, such as in this case with the people of Singapore and the Singapore Navy.
Very Sherman.
Mr Speaker, the Secretary of State will know that Huddersfield is a centre for defence industries. David Brown Gears, Reliance Engineering. I talk to them regularly. They say to me, one of the things that they miss is the trained personnel. The Army, Navy and Air Force used to be the biggest trainer of personnel in the country. And the diminished level of training in the armed services is reflected in the sector. They can't get enough highly trained people to actually employ.
Well, I'm aware of those companies, and they do an excellent job supporting the supply chain, particularly into our primes and on key programmes, particularly naval programmes. But I don't recognise the description he uses in relation to training. As he will be aware, I believe Defence is the biggest employer of apprenticeships in the country, but we're doing everything we can to support that. And a key way, Mr Speaker, is by a close relationship with industry, bringing them into our requirements early on so that they can plan and deliver the supply signal, particularly in terms of skills, to match our demand signal.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'd like to build on the incisive question from the Right Honourable Member for Rayleigh and Wickford. Over 125,000 applicants to the British Army were rejected during the last 5 years. It's emerged that 70% of applicants were dropped or withdrew at the paperwork stage. More than 8,000 withdrew their applications after having waited for at least 6 months. What consequences will Capita face for this record, and when might the Army bring soldier and officer recruitment back in-house?
Well, I think I would encourage him to direct questions about recruitment to the Minister for Defence and Families Personnel. As to the company he talks about, my focus is on industry, on supporting jobs, which this question is actually about, and I think we've got a fantastic record boosted by not only the exports that I referred to earlier, but the exports such as my honourable friend for Rugby was talking about.
Maria Riedel, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Defence procurement can strengthen UK sovereignty, security and economic growth. And on this side of the House, we believe defence investment should be directed first to UK businesses so we make, buy and sell more in Britain. But with that in mind, what steps is he taking in his rapid review to ensure that social value considerations properly take into account the huge advantages to the UK economy of awarding more contracts to British businesses so that we create more defence jobs here in the UK, because they don't seem to do so at present?
Well, I have to say to the Honourable Lady, I think there's a considerable consensus here, because I do agree with her about the importance of sovereign defence capability. But if I may say, it isn't just because of the economic benefits, although they are absolutely crucial. But as we enter this era, which has been described as pre-war, it's vital that we have a UK sovereign industrial base, because as the Ukrainians have learnt, there are certain skills, capabilities we need to have in the UK should we get to a hotter military situation, and that's why it's such a priority for us.
Dear Mather.
Question 7, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I refer the honourable gentleman to much that I said in response to the readiness question earlier, but the key point of addressing this issue with enablement is that it's the really unglamorous stuff that needs to be invested in first. There's no point buying more tanks until we've got more tank transporters. The government is seized of that and is doing exactly that. And Mr. Speaker, it's an opportunity to just place on record, in addition to my gratitude to the armed forces in response to the previous question, that there are tens of thousands of very hard-working MOD civil servants, both in main building and around the wider enterprise, who are hard at work on exactly this problem right now, and I'm very grateful to them for their efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister, like other colleagues, for his years of service. Since 2010, the size of our armed forces has decreased by over 43,000 personnel. The number of Royal Navy warships has decreased by 1 in 5, and more than 200 aircraft have been removed from service in just the last 5 years, with recruitment targets being missed year on year. Of which of these legacies of 14 years of Conservative government is the Minister most proud, and what actions could he be undertaking to do better?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think the thing that I am most proud of, beyond the exceptional operational output by His Majesty's Armed Forces every time that they're called upon, is that this government has increased the defence budget to more than £50 billion per year for the first time. And the honourable gentleman, whose interest in defence is very welcome indeed, should be enormously concerned that the Shadow Chancellor has repeatedly refused to commit to anything more than the 2% NATO floor for defence spending. And if his concern for defence is to last, he should be immediately concerned that that would equal a £7 billion cut on defence spending on day one of a Labour government, unless his party changes policy urgently.
James Sunderland.
Mr. Speaker, the question of whether our armed forces are fit for purpose should of course centre on whether they can meet the defence tasks set by the MOD, which I believe they can. In the same vein as the previous question, does the Minister agree with me that Labour's failure to commit to more than 2% of GDP for defence spending presents a much bigger risk to UK security than any objective debate on this side of the House?
Mr. Speaker, absolutely. 2.5% of GDP should be achieved urgently. The fiscal situation is improving, and this party has made that commitment. And as the Secretary of State said rightly in an interview the other day, both parties should be strongly considering a further increase in defence spending in the next Parliament.
Minister Maria Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the former Defence Secretary told this House last January, the Government has hollowed out and underfunded the UK military over the last 14 years, but this is in large part due to their total failure in armed forces recruitment. And now damning new figures show over the last decade, 800,000 people willing to serve and defend their country simply gave up and withdrew their applications. The current Defence Secretary himself says the recruitment system is ludicrous. The organisation that are running it got called the wrong name by an honourable gentleman on the other side of the House. But where is the current plan to fix this recruitment system? Is it working?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable lady is conflating two separate issues. The former Secretary of State for Defence and I, and everybody else who served on the government front bench since we've returned to the prospect of state-on-state war, has referred to a hollowing out of the force. It isn't the consequence of decisions just made by this government, it's the consequence of decisions made by governments since the fall of the Berlin Wall, because the force that we maintained for the Cold War and all of its enablement was not necessary when we were fighting counterinsurgency campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. That is what is meant by hollowing out, and the sooner that the honourable lady starts to deal with that as an issue rather than conflate it with others to make political points, the sooner that she'll start to contribute to a very important debate. Now, as far as recruitment goes, a record level of interest has been shown in joining our nation armed forces, and there is no hiding from the fact that we need to rapidly accelerate the way that people go from expression of interest to being in training.
Can we accelerate the questions with it? Chris Stevens.
Number 8, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the UK continually assesses potential threats to our overseas territories, including the sovereign base areas on the island of Cyprus. British Forces Cyprus provides a permanent military presence, and we are investing in the SBAs to combat current and future threats to ensure local, regional and global security.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for the response. His colleague, the Secretary of State, has stated in the past that we want to do everything possible to ensure the security of Cyprus. So does the Minister agree that keeping the Cypriot government informed of all UK military operations it conducts from their island is appropriate, and should be an official obligation for the security of Cyprus.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the SBAs are sovereign bases, and therefore, of course, we reserve the right to operate from them as we need, based on the UK national interest. But the honourable gentleman will be reassured to hear that the Secretary of State, his predecessors, me and other ministers in the department have very good relations with the Cypriots, and we do indeed seek to tell them as much as we possibly can about the operations that we are mounting from those bases.
James Gray.
Speaker, I'd like to add to the warm words that have been said about my right honourable friend, the member for Wells. He's been particularly supportive of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for the Armed Forces and of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, both of which I chair, and throughout he's been hugely supportive of it. Would agree with me that the sovereign base in Cyprus has a particularly important role to play in our activities in the Red Sea.
Mr. Speaker, Cyprus is in an incredibly important strategic location, which means that it is of great use to our current operations in the southern Red Sea, as well as the eastern Mediterranean, the Western Balkans, across into Central Asia and beyond. It is a vital mounting base for so much that the UK Armed Forces do, and we're incredibly fortunate to have that facility.
David Simmons.
Number 10, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I should like to answer 10, 18 and 19 together. There's a desperate need for increased humanitarian support to Gaza in the UK, including the MOD is working collectively with allies, partners and international organisations to deliver that desperate needed aid for the Gazan population.
David Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents are rightly proud of the work our armed forces are doing to facilitate the delivery of aid to prevent a colossal humanitarian catastrophe. What further steps can be taken to ensure that this British aid finds its way to civilians in need rather than into the hands of Hamas fighters?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is, of course, one of the greatest challenges of the situation at the moment, and we're working with the British Red Cross, with UNICEF, with the UN World Food Programme, with the Egyptian Red Crescent and others in order to ensure that that does indeed get to the right place. It is extremely challenging. It's been one of the things which has slowed down the process of that aid delivery.
Will Quint.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Israeli government has said that it wants to flood Gaza with aid. Will my right honourable friend assure the House that we will work with our partners globally to ensure that we're getting more aid into Gaza, into the hands of civilians, and that we assist the Israelis to deliver on this pledge as soon as possible?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker, and I can inform my honourable friend we have already delivered 74 tonnes of humanitarian aid via the RAF, 87 tonnes through the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. But we are pursuing, in addition to that, routes via land, via air and via maritime.
Judith Cummins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With half of Gaza already starving and the rest teetering on the edge of famine, with the UN Security Council voting for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, access to humanitarian aid is crucial. The Foreign Secretary stated this month that the UK would support the building of a temporary pier in Gaza to allow hundreds of extra daily truckloads of aid into the Strip. Can the Minister outline what steps he is taking, along with the Foreign Secretary, to ensure that this pier is constructed as quickly as possible?
The Right Honourable Lady will be pleased to hear that I've sent teams both to Tampa to work with CENTCOM and also to the region in order to help with the assistance of constructing that pier and the planning for it. In addition, right at the beginning of this conflict, I ensured that we did hydrographic research in order to aid exactly this kind of situation when the conditions were right to get a pier built. This is not a trivial endeavour, but we're working to deliver it as quickly as possible with the potential of getting 2.5 million meals into Gaza a day.
Emma Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, the ability for the UK government to deliver humanitarian aid depends upon the relationship the UK has with its Middle Eastern partners. So what impact does the Minister think recent events and recent UK government decisions in foreign policy has had upon this crucial relationship with those Middle Eastern partners?
Well, the Honourable Lady will be pleased to hear that both myself and the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister have been very proactive in both speaking to and indeed multiply visiting the region. I think I've visited the majority of countries in the Middle East and the Gulf region to discuss exactly the points that she's raised. There is now this very big-scale, large-scale programme of using a pier to get food in addition to the many other efforts that have been made. As my honourable friend pointed out, it's not just getting it in in there. It is the distribution once it's there that is great concern.
SNP spokesperson Dave Duncan.
When will the government make a further public determination on Israel's commitment to international humanitarian law, given the man-made famine now unfolding in northern Gaza and compounded by Israeli moves to obstruct the access of aid? And in the event that the UK's subsequent assessment finds, as the UN Secretary-General, Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have found, that the Israeli government and the IDF have violated international law, what steps will the UK government make to prohibit further arms sales to Israel pending a better resolution of this situation? And given that the Security Council has just now called for a ceasefire, what steps can the government make through the defence sector to accelerate all available aid for civilians in Gaza?
I think it's a pity to ask all those questions without referencing the 100-plus hostages which are still being held by Hamas after they brutally slaughtered population deliberately rather than as a byproduct of war. But he asked a number of questions. I can tell him that the issue of arms exports, the thing for which I'm responsible, just to put this in proportion, is I think just £48 million from the top of my head for last year to Israel. The numbers are actually very small indeed, but he'll know that this is a question for the FCDO.
Nick Smith.
Number 12, please, Mr. Speaker.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to answer questions 12, 14 and 15 together. The Department uses a range of measures to assess the effectiveness of defence acquisition. We have reduced the average time taken to deliver our projects and programmes, but we must go further to drive pace, so last month I announced our new integrated procurement model.
Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the National Audit Office has previously highlighted MOD pilot training procurement failures. So can I ask the Minister if the RAF is now meeting its pilot training quotas, and is the Minister satisfied with progress in this key area?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman actually asked a very important question. Of course, training is fundamental to bring in the next generation to man our capability. And I have recently had the pleasure to visit RAF Valley, where I discussed this issue with the RAF, and they were able to confirm to me that for the first time in a long time, there were more students taking up their places rather than in holds. That is a key metric where we are seeing significant progress, but yes, we do want to go further.
Stephanie Peacock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last March, the government said they would have their Ajax scheme ready between October 2028 and September 2029. Given that only 25% of armoured vehicles have been produced, are the government on target to meet this deadline?
Minister.
Yes.
Colin Mahmood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Notwithstanding the waste of £5 billion in procurement since 2019, will he join the Right Honourable Shadow Secretary of State for Defence in the campaign to Make in Britain, to ensure that our industry and our economy moves together to support not just defence but our economy as well? But how will he achieve that with Tata cutting down the blast furnace capacity with £500 million paid by us to them, and how will we be able to proceed with the AUKUS contract and other contracts without virgin steel?
Minister.
Well, on the important question of steel, we don't expect the closure of Port Talbot to have a significant impact on defence, but obviously we will continue to monitor that situation. But I would just gently point out, in the last year for which we have figures available, 22-23, 89% of spend by the Ministry of Defence with industry was with British industry, Mr. Speaker. But it's going to be an awful lot harder for them to make that level of spend if they are unable to commit to matching our spending commitments. So if he's so concerned, perhaps he'll join with other colleagues on the opposite side in insisting that the Shadow Secretary of State confirms whether he's going to match 2.3% now and our target of 2.5% as soon as the economy supports it.
Alex Shelbrooke.
Speaker, I may just take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to also place on record my thanks to my right honourable and gallant friend for Wales for all the work he's done. It was indeed a joy to work with him when I was in the department. Mr. Speaker, may I first of all thank my honourable friend for his procurement review. It's an excellent document and moving forward in the way that are the pragmatic ways forward. Can I ask him, as part of the review and moving forward, that he does a reassessment of potential gaps that may occur between all platforms being retired along with the delays that have come to new platforms. And also, does he agree with me that the housing procurement side, accommodation for forces, is actually an operational capability as much as a tank is?
Well, my honourable friend makes an excellent point. He made a similar point in the debate last week on readiness about the importance of accommodation, because I think we can all agree there is a tendency in defence to focus on the big shiny platforms. Actually, accommodation is a key priority. We're very committed to improving accommodation. We know that the winter before this one, performance was not satisfactory. That's why, first of all, we put in the extra investment, £400 million extra, and we announced the winter plan. And I'm pleased to say we've made huge progress, for example, ensuring thousands of properties have work achieved on damp and mould improvements.
Ronald Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted that the Minister of Defence has confirmed the procurement of additional Chinooks, given that RFA in my constituency is the home of the Chinook Force, but it's also home to their frontline maintenance, second-line engine repair and in-depth upgrade and modification. Given that 85% of Chinook fleet sustainment takes place in the UK today, can I have my honourable friend's assurance that RF will remain the home of the Chinook and that a similar, if not higher, amount of maintenance of the new variants will take place here and across Britain?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. I very much enjoyed my visit to Odium and we discussed a wide range of issues, but he's absolutely right to draw attention to the fact we've committed to this procurement of 14 extended range Chinooks. They have a huge range, 1,000 miles, but as he says, in particular, I wanted to stress there is industrial benefit to the UK and of course to his constituency, because I can confirm that within that procurement, not only have we made a £300 million saving, but it also includes a £150 million benefit to UK prosperity.
Jack LaPlesty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I ask my honourable friend to update the House on progress made with UK-Ukraine defence manufacturing cooperation, especially in regard to removing the hurdles? I mean, is there anything more the government should be doing?
Well, my honourable friend has championed this consistently, and I'm pleased to say we held the first UK trade mission in December, and we will be having further such missions. But I can confirm, most importantly, that following that mission, UK defence companies and the Ukrainian government have signed agreements, including Babcock being awarded a 3-year contract by the Ukraine Ministry of Defence to support and maintain 2 mine countermeasure vessels. BAE Systems and AMS Integrated Solutions have signed an agreement that will enable them to offer specialised artillery system support directly to the Ukrainian Armed Forces. And finally, Thales have signed a memorandum of understanding with the Ukrainian drone company Aerodrone, which will bring together the best of Ukrainian and Northern Irish engineering to deliver new capability for Ukraine's armed forces.
SNP spokesperson Dave Doughty.
Procurement of the new medium-lift helicopter has been characteristically suboptimal under this government, but this particular defence procurement minister has managed, with his inverse Midas touch, to ensure that costs have grown from circa 1 billion to 1.3 billion. Delivery forecasts have slipped 6 years to 2031, and the number of assets that will be received has gone from 44 down to 35. With this budget invariably going to slip to the right, with the service personnel going to be under-resourced and the budget almost certainly going to grow, what possible confidence can anyone have in this defence procurement minister?
Well, I won't take any lectures from the Honourable General. His party is unable even to procure a ferry. But when it comes to the new medium helicopter, and it doesn't say here, I know the subject, and I can confirm to him, because I'm very proud of this, at my insistence, our competition for the new medium helicopter, which is what his question was about, will have a far greater emphasis both on supporting UK industry and on supporting exports, because it's by supporting exports that we have industrial resilience and support prosperity across the United Kingdom. Of course, it's a competition, but we have 3 very good entrants.
Come to topicals, Nigel Mills.
Number 2, please, sir.
Tuesday.
Well, Mr. Speaker, like others in this House, I want to pay tribute to my right honourable and gallant friend, a soldier, MP, Minister for nearly the entire Parliament. His knowledge is only matched by his great passion for the subject, and we are all very grateful for his service. Last week, I was in Australia signing a historic defence treaty to enhance our Indo-Pacific security, and at the same time, our trilateral AUKUS partnership with the United States is accelerating, and as the House will know, ASC and BAE Systems have a multi-billion-pound contract for the SSN AUKUS. And earlier today, the Prime Minister and I launched our first ever nuclear defence command paper, which will, for the first time, will set out the true benefit of this great enterprise, making it a whole national effort.
Nigel Mills.
Can I thank him for the answer, and can I welcome the command paper being published this morning, especially the important role that Rolls-Royce and Derby play in it. Would you agree for it to be a truly national enterprise, there needs to be a truly national supply chain and access to jobs for people right across the country as well?
Well, Honourable Friend is absolutely right about the extent of the supply chain, and in addition to the very large investment in Rolls-Royce, for which the Australians put £2.4 billion in last week, and all of the work in Barrow that the command paper talks about today, there are benefits for virtually every single constituency up and down the country.
Secretary of State John Healey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We condemn the deadly terrorist attacks in Moscow on Friday, and our thoughts are with all those who are affected. But the attack must not become a Kremlin cover for Putin's illegal war in Ukraine. And in recent days, we've seen multiple Russian strikes on Ukrainian cities, yet the last UK air defence support was announced last year. When is the next one?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, I join the right honourable gentleman in his sending the condolences on that horrific terror attack. He's absolutely right to say there is no connection whatsoever that we're aware of with Ukraine, and indeed ISIS have claimed responsibility. We must resist Putin's efforts to try to link the two. With regard to air defence, in fact, there have been much more recent attempts to aid our Ukrainian friends, including through the International Fund for Ukraine, which has laid 27 contracts. We have a £900 million fund run by the UK on behalf of a large number of other countries.
John Healey.
Yes, anything more recent, of course, was from the Ukrainian Fund for Ukraine, not from the UK, which is why we strongly welcomed the £2.5 billion of UK military support for 2024. But, Mr. Speaker, for nearly 3 months since that announcement, ministers have said that the first deliveries to Ukraine won't happen until Q1 of the new financial year. And wars do not follow financial years. So when will the UK move beyond this stop-start military aid and help Ukraine now with the spring-summer offensive?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can tell the right honourable gentleman we have a constant flow of foreign material that we're buying and sending into Ukraine. I announced just recently £325 million for Ukraine for drones, with British Ukrainian drones, and we've increased the amount of money overall going to Ukraine to £2.5 billion from the previous 2 years, £2.3 billion. I will just gently say to the right honourable gentleman, because it's been raised by a couple of my colleagues today, he needs to explain how his side would manage an increased budget to Ukraine when their plan is to cut £7 billion off the overall defence budget.
Andrew Slough.
An Army non-serving partner says of her children's mental health treatment, and I quote very briefly, Mr. Speaker, "When you move, they close the case, and then you have to go all the way back through the system, which takes forever. By the time you get in, you're moving again." Can you give the House an update, please, on recommendations 74, 75 and 76, which deals with this issue on the Living in Our Shoes report?
I'm grateful to my old friend, and as ever, pay tribute for the work he's done in this. It is the case when people move around the country, they are disadvantaged. We recognise that, which is why the Integrated Care Board is now doing a pilot on how we can get around this issue of people losing their place on waiting lists when they travel around the country. Obviously, this is an issue that involves other government departments. We have a responsibility nevertheless, and we discharge that responsibility in a number of ways. Give them an example, HeadFit is being adapted and adopted at the moment to ensure that our veterans and our service families are able to access much of its content.
Gaskell.
The Government has previously refused to confirm or deny whether Israeli F-35s have been using RAF air bases or indeed other military cooperation between the UK and Israel. Given the decision of the ICJ and now the decision of the UN Security Council to call for an immediate ceasefire, what are the operational or policy reasons that deny UK citizens the right to know whether their government has been complicit in Israeli genocide in Gaza?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we don't comment on operational matters of that sort.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Qatar hosts Hamas's most senior leaders in Doha and should have been applying far more pressure on the terror group to release the Israeli hostages and to surrender. So does my right honourable friend agree that Qatar's malign activities bolsters our adversaries and therefore weakens our own defence?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not entirely sure I do agree. I mean, I'll leave the Foreign Office to talk about the diplomatic angles that they are pursuing. But in my experience, Qatar has been an incredibly helpful partner across a whole load of things over the last few years. And we enjoy the opportunity to strengthen that partnership, both through the sale of UK-built defence capabilities, but also through increasingly operating together in areas of mutual concern. It's a relationship around which the UK can build further and has great potential.
Thank you. HMS Albion is twinned with Chester and we deeply value the ship and her company. Can the Minister provide the next date HMS Albion and HMS Bulwark will be at sea, or will he just admit he's mothballed them both?
Well, the Honourable Lady will be pleased to know I was on HMS Albion the other week. She's not been mothballed. It will be the case that the other ship is the first to sail. I don't know the timing. It will just depend on operational requirements, but they are both continuing in operation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, like many colleagues across the House, I attended the All-Party Parliamentary Group for UK Israel and Friends of Israel. We were joined by 2 released hostages and a delegation consisting of young siblings, sons, daughters, grandchildren and their families being held, and cousins who have members of their families being held hostage in Gaza. It's now 5 months since the hostages were taken. Can I just ask the Minister to ensure that these victims remain right at the front of mind of all decisions taken on the Middle East?
Well, my honourable friend can have absolutely that assurance. And if I may, whilst it is shocking to see what is happening in the region, it is too often forgotten, I'm afraid, including in this House, today, from some members opposite, that this all began with the taking of those hostages, and we will never forget.
Martin Day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pension justice is on everybody's lips just now, so can the Minister tell me what this government has done to support the 30,000 veterans who left the service before 1975 and have lost out on preserved pensions?
Minister. I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman. As he knows very well, consecutive governments have made it plain that we don't make changes retrospectively to pensions. As for pensions overall for the armed forces, Mr. Speaker, you'll know, as I do as a beneficiary, they are equitable, fair and generous.
Caroline Downey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The 2016 Better Defence Estates plans earmarked Fort Blockhouse in Gosport for disposal. Here we are 8 years later with numerous delays, and that site is still rotting at taxpayers' expense, doing nothing for the local economy, nothing for the local community and nothing for the MOD. Can the Minister please update me when we will finally see some progress on that site?
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend, and I enjoyed my visit to her constituency where we looked at a range of infrastructure and accommodation. I appreciate that she wants to see progress here. I would just stress, whilst we engage as closely as possible with Gosport Council on it and want to make progress, it is a very complex site. There are significant defence assets still in place with DIO, but also with the Royal Navy. But I'm committed to looking at what more we can do and to engaging further with her.
Jessica Morden.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. There are tens of thousands of pregnant women in Gaza suffering malnutrition and at serious risk of delivering their babies unsafely and without health care. Can the Minister outline what particular steps are taken along with the Foreign Secretary to support delivery of food, medical supplies to these particularly vulnerable women?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are working to try to bring the supplies to all of the citizens of Gaza. I didn't run through the list of provisions, but it does include provisions for those in medical need, and particularly women who may be pregnant. As I mentioned earlier, we're working on plans with the Americans in particular, but also the Jordanians, to provide vastly greater amounts of aid into Gaza.
Mr.
Speaker, the terrible terrorist attacks in Moscow reminds us that jihadi extremism has not disappeared. Given its ideology, its reach and its strength, would the Secretary of State agree with me that ISIS-K is every much a threat to the West as it is to Russia?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman is absolutely right. There's a perception that Daesh has gone away. Daesh core is cooped up in prisons in northern Syria, but Daesh affiliates are growing alarmingly quickly in other parts of the world, and the attack in Moscow is a reminder to us all that we must continue to focus both on the counter-terror threat as well as the state threats.
Final question, Dan Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I wish the Minister for the Armed Forces all the very best for his next posting? He will recall that on the 1st of February he made a commitment to reassess the ARUP eligibility specifically for former members of the Triples, and he said that it's a process that would take 12 weeks. Can I ask him to give an update on the progress that's been made with that work to date?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, it's disappointing to finish on a down note, but as the Honourable Gentleman knows from a written answer that I gave him earlier in the week, it has taken longer than I wanted to establish an independent group of new casework assessors, and thus that 12-week period has not yet begun. I am told by officials when I reluctantly signed off the answer to him earlier in the week that that process is nigh on complete and thus the 12 weeks should start imminently, and he won't be surprised to know that, preempting the Honourable Gentleman's question, I've encouraged them that 8 weeks would sound an awful lot better than 12 given the delay in getting started.
Completes questions.
Point of order.
Is it relating to defence questions? Dave Dougan.
Mr Speaker, at defence questions on the 8th of January, I asked the Defence Procurement Minister a very straightforward question about HMS Argyll, the type of question you would expect the Defence Procurement Minister to have an answer at his fingertips. But instead, he said as quickly and as curtly as he could that he would write to me with an answer. It's almost 3 months later, Mr Speaker, and I regret to inform you and the House I've received no such information from the Defence Procurement Minister, nor have I even received an acknowledgement that he intends to do so. Can I ask your advice that when honourable and right honourable members get a slippery minister on the hook and they choose to wriggle off it by promising to write to members and they then don't, what recourse do members of Parliament have?
Well, first of all, I think we ought to choose the language when you want a response. And I would say, and I had a lot of sympathy. Actually, it does relate to these questions, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt because I think it's an important matter. As a senior member of the SNP and being their spokesperson, I do expect you to get timely replies. I don't expect replies to take so long. I'm sure that the bench has heard, and I would expect a response to be sent rather quickly following your intervention. Right, we're now coming to the statement.